I, 26M, grew up with my father after my parents divorced when I was 8. My mother moved to Europe with her new boyfriend, promising to keep in touch, but those calls gradually faded until they stopped altogether. It was just Dad and me in our 3-bedroom house that he'd built with his own hands. He worked as a carpenter, and I learned the trade alongside him during summers and weekends. When I was 17, Dad met Diane at a community fundraiser. She was recently divorced with 2 daughters, Melissa, 16, and Jessica, 14. Dad fell hard and fast. By the time I graduated high school, they were married, and Diane and her daughters moved into our home. From the beginning, something felt off about Diane and her daughters. They were polite enough when Dad was around, but the moment he left for work, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Diane would bark orders at me while her daughters watched TV or scrolled through their phones. I tried my best to get along with them, hoping that eventually we'd find a way to be a real family. After high school, I decided to follow in my father's footsteps and become a carpenter. I apprenticed under him, learning everything about the craft. Dad and I had always planned for me to join his small business and eventually take it over. This meant I continued living at home, saving money to eventually get my own place. While I contributed to household expenses and did more than my fair share of chores, Diane and her daughters treated me like an unwelcome guest. They complained about my work boots by the door, the sound of my truck when I came home late from jobs, and even the smell of my aftershave in the bathroom. Nothing I did was ever right, but Dad seemed oblivious to the tension. "They're just adjusting," he'd say whenever I tried to talk to him about the situation. "Give them time." But time only made things worse. Diane began redecorating the house, removing all traces of my mother and our previous life. Family photos disappeared, replaced by professional portraits of Diane and her daughters. My childhood mementos were packed away in boxes and relegated to the garage. She even changed the color of the house from the blue my mother had chosen to a stark white that Dad hated but wouldn't admit. About 3 years ago, Dad started experiencing back pain. He brushed it off as part of getting older, but I noticed he was slowing down. The doctor eventually diagnosed him with a degenerative disc disease that would only get worse with time. Dad stubbornly refused to consider retirement, but I could see the toll the physical labor was taking on him. Last year, just before Christmas, Dad's condition deteriorated rapidly after he fell from a ladder at a job site. He needed surgery and faced a long recovery. I stepped up, taking over all of our ongoing projects and handling the business while he recuperated. It was exhausting work, but I was determined not to let Dad down or lose the clients he'd spent decades cultivating. Diane seemed concerned about Dad's health, but I soon realized her real worry was financial. Without Dad working, she feared her lifestyle would be affected. Her daughters, now 24 and 22, still lived at home, neither one with steady employment. Melissa had dropped out of community college and worked part-time at a clothing store. Jessica had a series of short-lived jobs, none lasting more than a few months. While Dad was in the hospital, Diane took me aside and said, "We need to talk about what happens to the business if your father can't work anymore." "I'll keep it running," I assured her. "Dad's been training me for years." She gave me a skeptical look. "We might need to consider selling it. The money would secure our future." I was shocked. "Sell the business? Dad would never agree to that. It's his life's work, our legacy." "Well, things change," she said with a shrug. After Dad came home from the hospital, he was determined to recover quickly and get back to work. But his progress was slower than he'd hoped. Physical therapy was painful, and he struggled with simple tasks. I continued handling all the business, visiting job sites early in the morning before checking on Dad, then returning to work until late at night. One evening, about 3 months after Dad's surgery, I came home late from finishing a client's built-in bookshelves. I was tired and hungry, but I'd brought home Dad's favorite takeout as a surprise. When I walked in, Diane, Melissa, and Jessica were sitting at the dining table with Dad, who looked uncomfortable. "Where have you been?" Diane demanded. "We've been waiting to discuss important family matters." "I was finishing the Morrison project," I explained, setting the food on the counter. "Where's the emergency?" Diane exchanged glances with her daughters. We've been talking about the future of this household. Your father's condition has created financial strain. The business is doing fine, I countered. I've kept all our clients, and even brought in some new ones. That's not enough, Melissa interjected, twirling her hair. Mom deserves better than scraping by on what you bring in. I looked at Dad, who was staring at his plate. Dad, what's this about? Before he could answer, Diane spoke. We need to make some changes. The girls and I have been discussing it, and we think the house needs renovations. A more modern look would increase its value. Renovations? Now, Dad's still recovering, and the business needs my full attention. Jessica rolled her eyes. It's always about the business with you. Because the business pays the bills, I replied, my patience wearing thin. Your father and I have decided, Diane continued as if I hadn't spoken, that we're going to convert the garage into a master suite for us. The girls will take the upstairs bedrooms. I frowned, confused. But I'm in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Where am I supposed to sleep? There was an uncomfortable silence. Then Diane said it. Let's just take his room and kick him out, she declared firmly. It's not like he contributes anything. Exactly, Melissa agreed with a smirk. You're 26. Shouldn't you have your own place by now? Yeah, Jessica added. We need the space more than you do. I stood there, stunned by the casual cruelty of their words. I looked at Dad, waiting for him to defend me, to remind them that I was keeping his business alive while he recovered. But he said nothing, his eyes still fixed on his plate. I ate my meal in silence, the food tasting like ash in my mouth. After dinner, I retreated to my room, lying awake for hours, replaying the conversation and my father's silence. How could he allow them to speak to me that way? How could he forget everything I'd done, was still doing for him? Early the next morning, before anyone else was awake, I made a decision. I called Uncle Robert, my father's brother and business partner from years ago, before they'd had a falling out over Dad's marriage to Diane. Uncle Robert had warned Dad that she was after his money and house, but Dad had been too in love to listen. Their partnership had dissolved, but Uncle Robert had gone on to build a successful construction company in the neighboring town. Uncle Robert, it's me. I need your help. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Uncle Robert's kitchen, pouring out everything that had happened over the past few years. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. I always knew she was bad news, he said when I finished. But to treat you this way after everything you've done? That's beyond the pale. And my brother allowing it? That's not the man I grew up with. I don't know what to do, I admitted. I've invested years in Dad's business, but I can't stay in that house anymore. Uncle Robert stroked his beard thoughtfully. You know, I've been looking for someone to manage our custom cabinetry division. The pay's good, and I've got a small rental property you could stay in until you figure things out. Are you serious? Dead serious. You're talented, hardworking, and trustworthy. Exactly what I need. Plus, it's about time someone taught Diane a lesson. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Thank you, Uncle Robert. I don't know what to say. Say you'll start Monday, he replied with a grin. And let me help you with one more thing. When I returned home that afternoon, Diane was out shopping with her daughters. Dad was napping in his recliner, the TV playing softly in the background. I gently woke him. Dad, we need to talk. He blinked sleepily. What's up, son? I heard what Diane said last night. About kicking me out. Dad had the decency to look ashamed. She didn't mean it like that. It's just that with my medical bills and the mortgage. Dad, I've been running the business single-handedly for months. I've kept all your clients happy and even brought in new ones. I've been paying my share of the bills, plus covering extra expenses when needed. And you sat there while they talked about throwing me out of my own home. It's not like that, he protested weakly. Diane's just concerned about our future. No, Dad. She's concerned about her future. And her daughters. Not mine. And from what I can see, not really yours either. Dad's face flushed. That's not fair. Diane loves me. Maybe she does. But she doesn't respect me. And apparently, neither do you. So I'm leaving. His eyes widened in alarm. Leaving? But what about the business? The current projects? I've already arranged for the Wilson brothers to take over your ongoing jobs. They'll do good work. I've written up detailed notes for each project. But where will you go? What will you do? Uncle Robert offered me a job and a place to stay. Dad's face darkened. Robert? You went to him behind my back. Yes, because he actually values me and my skills. Unlike my own father. That hit home. Dad's expression crumpled. Son, please. I know things have been difficult, but we can work this out. It's too late, Dad. I've made my decision. I'm moving out tomorrow morning. I went upstairs and started packing my belongings, tears stinging my eyes, but determination keeping me focused. Hours later, I heard Diane and her daughters return, followed by raised voices. Dad was telling them I was leaving. Their response was predictably self-centered, concerns about the business, the income, who would take care of Dad's physical therapy. Not once did I hear concern for me. The next morning, I was up before dawn, loading the last of my things into my truck. Dad watched from the porch, looking older than his 55 years. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. For my own self-respect. As the sun began to rise, a convoy of vehicles turned onto our street. 3 moving trucks, 2 vans, and several pickup trucks, all bearing the logo of Uncle Robert's construction company. Diane burst through the front door in her bathrobe. What is going on? Who are all these people? Uncle Robert stepped forward, clipboard in hand. Morning, Diane. Long time no see. Robert, what are you doing here? Just helping my nephew move out, as requested. He gestured to the trucks. Since you're so eager to have him gone, we thought we'd make it official. Diane's face paled. I don't understand. By now, Melissa and Jessica had joined their mother on the porch, their expressions confused and alarmed. It's simple, Uncle Robert continued. You wanted my nephew out, so out he goes, along with everything he's entitled to. At his signal, workers began unloading furniture from the trucks and carrying it into the house, while others started removing items. Wait, what are they doing with our furniture? Diane shrieked. Not yours, Uncle Robert corrected. My brother's and my nephew's. We're just dividing the assets. What assets? What are you talking about? Uncle Robert handed her a document. This is the original deed to the house. My brother built it with our father, long before he met you. He owns it outright. Her face went ashen. But we're married. What's his mine? Actually, no. My brother may have been foolish enough to marry you without a prenup, but he wasn't foolish enough to add you to the deed. The house remains solely in his name. Diane fumbled with paper, her hands shaking. But the business. The business. Uncle Robert nodded to me. Show her. I pulled out a folder and extracted a legal document. This is the partnership agreement Dad and I signed when I turned 21. I own 49% of the business, with the option to purchase an additional 2% upon Dad's retirement, which, given his health, might be sooner than planned. But that's not all, Uncle Robert continued, clearly enjoying himself. The contents of this house, the furniture, appliances, even the fixtures, were either brought in by my brother before your marriage or purchased with business funds for business purposes. The dining table, where you so kindly informed my nephew he wasn't welcome, that's his. He made it in his first year of apprenticeship. Diane's face had transitioned from pale to bright red. This is ridiculous. You can't just come in here and... Actually, we can. I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Everything is documented and legal. We're simply dividing what's mine from what's Dad's, and what's Dad's from what's yours. Which, as it turns out, isn't much. Jessica stepped forward, eyes blazing. But where are we supposed to sleep? You're taking our beds. Those beds, Uncle Robert pointed out, were handcrafted by my nephew for his future home. They were stored here temporarily. Melissa turned to Dad, who had been watching everything in stunned silence. Dad, are you going to let them do this to us? It was the first time I'd ever heard either of Diane's daughters call my father Dad, and the manipulation was so transparent it made my stomach turn. Dad looked from Diane to her daughters, then to me and Uncle Robert, conflict clear on his face. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. "I think," he said slowly, "that I need to have a long talk with my wife. Alone." Uncle Robert nodded. "That's fair. We'll continue with the division of property as planned. The lawyers have already worked out what belongs to whom." The workers continued their methodical process, removing furniture, appliances, and even fixtures that I had crafted over the years. With each item that left the house, Diane's face grew more pinched, her daughters more distraught. I approached Dad once more before leaving. I meant what I said about the Wilson brothers. They'll take good care of your clients. The business books are in order, and I've left detailed instructions for everything. Dad's eyes were damp. I never meant for things to go this way. Neither did I, Dad. But here we are. Where will you be staying? He asked, his voice small. With Uncle Robert for now. I'll be managing his custom cabinetry division starting Monday. Dad nodded, a mixture of pride and sorrow in his eyes. You always were talented, even more than me. I had a good teacher. Despite everything, I meant it. As the last of my belongings were loaded into the trucks, I took one final look at the house, where I'd grown up. Diane and her daughter stood on the porch, their expressions a mixture of shock, anger, and dismay. The sight of their faces as they realized just how much they had underestimated me, how much they were losing, was something I would remember for a long time. By mid-morning, the convoy was ready to depart. I climbed into my truck and started the engine, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Uncle Robert appeared at my window. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Ready." As we drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Dad stood in the driveway, watching us go. I couldn't read his expression from this distance, but I hoped that someday, when he finally saw Diane for who she truly was, we might find our way back to each other. 3 months have passed since that day. I've settled into my new role at Uncle Robert's company and discovered that I enjoy the challenges of management as much as I loved the hands-on work of carpentry. The rental property has become a home, and I've even started dating someone who appreciates my craft and respects my values. Dad calls occasionally. Our conversations are stilted at first, but gradually becoming more comfortable. He's filed for divorce. It seems that once the scales fell from his eyes regarding Diane, he couldn't unsee the truth. The house is on the market, and he's looking for a small condo closer to Uncle Robert and me. Last week, he asked if I would consider coming back to his business. "It was always meant to be yours," he said. "I just lost sight of that for a while." I told him I needed time to think about it. Uncle Robert has been more than fair with me, and I won't abandon him the way my father abandoned me. But perhaps someday, Dad and I might find a way to work together again, this time as true partners, with the respect and appreciation that was missing before. As for Diane and her daughters, I heard they're living in a small apartment across town. Sometimes I drive by Dad's house, my child at home, and see the for sale sign in the yard. Soon, it will belong to someone else, and that chapter of my life will truly be closed. But I'm not sad. That morning, when the moving trucks arrived and their smiles vanished, taught me an important lesson. Sometimes, you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly worth.